There are a lot of great classic games on the original PlayStation. Games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and Metal Gear Solid are just a few out of many. Now, just like any other system, it has its fair share of obscure games. Now, when it comes to RPGs, everyone knows the big ones. The Final Fantasy series, Wild Arms, Vagrant Story, all those really big ones. But there's one RPG series that has definitely been forgotten over the years. That series all began here with the original Kingsfield. This game was developed by From Software, the same company that would go on to make Dark Souls and Demon's Souls. They released Kingsfield back on the original PlayStation in 1996 here in North America. This is a 3D game that's in first person. It was groundbreaking at the time for obvious reasons. But before we go into gameplay, let's talk a little history first, because this is not the first Kingsfield game. In fact, the original Kingsfield was only exclusive to Japan. So when Kingsfield 2 came out in Japan, they brought it over to the US and just called it Kingsfield. Kind of like how Final Fantasy 3 is really Final Fantasy 6. So really, Kingsfield 2 in North America is Kingsfield 3, and Kingsfield the Ancient City is Kingsfield 4. It kind of reminds me of the old zombie movies. You know how Zombie by Lucio Fulci is called Zombie 2 in Europe? That's kind of what it reminds me of for some reason. Before we talk gameplay, let's quickly talk about the plot. So let me just get out the instruction manual here, and, well, since I've already bored you to death with the history lesson, I'm not going to torture you with this. So I'll just give a brief little synopsis on what's going on. The game opens up after your shipwrecks on a mysterious island known as Melanat. All you got is a dagger and no direction to go. Since it's an RPG, you'd expect the combat to be very strategic, like most RPGs. But here, it's simple. A little too simple, I might add, because all you do is take a step in, swing your weapon, and take a step back. It's not very interesting, but it's not the worst system in the world. It does get a little monotonous, though. While we're not told what time period it is, it's pretty obvious that it's a medieval sort of time period, which is really nice because you have a variety of medieval weapons to use. Maces, bows, swords, and daggers. Plenty of awesome armor, too. In fact, the goal of the game is to find the Moonlight Sword, which is this sword with magic powers, and to get to it you have to kill a dragon. So already it feels kind of like some sort of fairy tale or old medieval stories that people would tell. But let's quickly get back to the combat for a second. You see those 2 meters in the top left corner? Those represent a power meter and a magic meter. Every time you swing your weapon, it drains the power meter entirely. If you don't wait for the meter to recharge, your attack will be weaker, which also unfortunately adds to the monotonous of the combat, because you can't just swing and swing and swing like crazy. Now for the magic meter, it's different. You can use your magic a lot more than you can use your sword, but I don't recommend it because it's definitely not as powerful. One thing that this game is known for is its difficulty, because it's a pretty difficult game. I mean, there's enemies at the beginning of the game that can just kill you in one hit, so it's best to be very careful. One thing that makes the game difficult is that whenever you die, you go back. And if you don't save, you lose all your items, you lose all your experience points that you've gained, which is common for RPGs, but like I said, there are enemies that can kill you with one hit at the beginning of the game. A lot of the enemies are really powerful at the beginning, which again is normal for RPGs, because as you kill more enemies, you level up all your stats and you become more powerful. But when you're not expecting to get killed by a skeleton or something with a huge sword, it can be very frustrating. And I do say unexpected because there's one time where you can open up a chest and a skeleton comes out and just kills you right then and there. A lot of people usually have the same complaints towards this game. The character doesn't move fast enough and everything just feels like it's underwater or something like that. Personally, I see why that bothers people. It doesn't bother me all that much. But I will say this, if you go into this game expecting a really responsive first-person style game, you're going to be very disappointed because this is not like an Elder Scrolls game nowadays where it's responsive and fast. This is pretty slow, and there's times where it just drops to single-digit frames. It feels like the game was a little too ambitious for the time. Like, I wonder what this game would be like if it was on the most advanced hardware at the time. Maybe it would be better if it was on PC at the time instead of the original PlayStation. You got games like The Elder Scrolls 2, Daggerfall. It really showcases what the PC can do, and I really do think that From Software really should have focused more on PC instead of consoles. But I still think it's really impressive that they were able to cram all of this on a PlayStation disc. It's like Doom on the Super Nintendo. Yeah, it may not run the best, but it's still impressive to see what the system was capable of doing. I should quickly talk about the controls real quick, because for the most part they're okay. But when you want to look up and down, it feels pretty clunky, because you have to use the L2 and R2 buttons. It takes a while to get used to, and at the same time it just makes you wish that you could just use some thumbsticks. But now let's talk about the music of this game. And I gotta say, I really do love the music of Kingsfield. For the most part, it really does feel like something that would come out of the Middle Ages. Now, there are times when it doesn't, but for most of the time, the music really fits in with the adventure. One other thing I want to mention about this game are the enemies. They're okay. They're not the greatest enemies in the world. I mean, you have your usuals like the skeletons, the spider-like creatures, you know, the dungeon crawlers, and that's pretty much it. I mean, you got some enemy soldiers here and there, which is nice, but overall, most of the enemies are just kind of meh. Also, no one has any facial features. There also seems to be a lack of NPCs. Most of them are either shopkeepers or the occasional dude who's fishing by the lake that gives you a little bit of info on the island. But that's pretty much it. There's also not a whole lot of sound design here. Mostly what you get is the sound of your weapon swinging and the sounds of enemies that are walking around or getting hurt. That's pretty much it, which is a little disappointing, but oh well, it gets the job done. One other thing that I want to talk about are the environments. The environments all look the same, which is very confusing because you don't really have a mini-map of some sort. You just have this compass. So it can get very frustrating when you're in a dungeon and you just can't find your way out of it. You can find maps along the way, but it just makes me wish that there was a little mini-map in the corner or something. One thing that this game really wants you to do is explore the environment. It rewards you by giving you awesome weapons or some new armor or even some magic. One thing that's kind of a problem when you first play the game is not knowing what's a door and what's a wall. I know that doesn't make a whole lot of sense just by explaining it, but if you play this game by yourself for the very first time, you're not going to know what's a door and what's a wall, so you just gotta go around the game mashing X hoping a door will open. So that was Kingsfield for the original PlayStation. I do see why this game has been forgotten over the years with its clunky controls and slowdown, but I do think it's something that you should definitely check out if you're into RPGs. And that's really all I have to say, so thank you guys for watching and I will see you in another video.